You are live. Good morning. Good morning. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today?
Man, I'm great. I'm great. Always appreciate you getting up early on the West Coast just to have a weekly conversation with me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yep. So, this week we talked a little bit earlier in the week, and always wanting to come up with some good topics to go through, right? So, I know often we think about what's going on in our lives or what, people are talking to us about, our clients and our friends and family. And, the topic that you came up with for the week is pretty exciting, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of persistence and just really having that grit, right? So, just like I like to tell everybody before we get started every week, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just somebody that's out here having a conversation with my brother. And what we're trying to do is share, things that we picked up in our own experiences, in business and just really on the personal side. So, I'm James Morris. I'm the president and CEO of TMC Solutions. I also run a coaching company called Morris Motivation. And this is my brother, Jermaine. Man, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Jermaine Morris, definite relation. And I'm a certified coach and consultant with a practice based around a DISC assessment. So using a test to help people, whether it be personally, professionally, socially, relationally, just a better understanding of ourselves. And the premise I always work under is self-awareness without judgment. So just learning how we are and how we operate in the world, and then taking that information to help get us to where it is we want to be.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Right. So again, thank you again for jumping on. So, let's just jump right into the discussion today. Those of you that haven't seen us before, we don't do a lot of negativity.
No.
We don't do the drama. This isn't the place for it. I'm heavily into the business space. I own 3 companies. I also do some executive coaching and consulting. My brother is a counselor, so he works with people on self-improvement. What's your tagline that you use? Without judgment.
Yeah, self-awareness without judgment.
Self-awareness without judgment. And so what we're doing is we just want to help bring people just more aware. So just jumping into the discussion, I tell you one thing that really got me thinking about perseverance and grit. And my CFO actually purchased a book for me called Grit that I got to look at, and I've been reading. And what I really started to think about was, as a business owner, some of the challenges that I've gone through. I've gone through COVID. We go through ACA. So that's when Obamacare hit. And while that was a great thing for the masses, the impact that it had for businesses with over 30 employees, and especially small businesses, was pretty significant. And so as we went through it, there were so many times where I just wanted to give up, right? I mean, I was sitting here thinking, what I really need to do is go back to corporate America, go back to my corner office where I had a great team of people that were doing great work, and just have a job. But there was just a burning fire in my spirit that made me feel like, man, I can't quit. First of all, I'm so prideful. I don't want to feel like a failure. So there's the first thing. But so now you start thinking about, what are the techniques? What are the tools that it's going to take for me to keep going, right? This is when we go into survival mode. And so I think that's kind of where we want to talk about. But let me know your thoughts on that, Jermaine.
About when you think that you want to quit and to continue moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that regardless of what you're doing, like, there's always going to be something that's going to make you want to quit.
Right.
You quit wanting to go to the gym, you quit wanting to going back to school, you just quit wanting to go to work, you want to quit these kids. Like, at some point, there's always a thought of just like, man, I just smooth walk away.
Yeah.
But I think that always remembering why you started is important. And then really that's going to be the big thing, is remembering why you got into it.
Yeah.
Because whether it be because it was a goal you were trying to reach or a place you weren't happy yet before. Why do you stay and fight for your marriage? Because I didn't want to be single anymore.
Yeah.
Why did you start your own business? Because I didn't want to work for somebody else anymore.
Yeah.
Why did you do, remembering why you started, remembering where you were, and then using that as fuel to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. I think back to, one of my motivations, right? So as you know, your nephews, I got 3 sons. And I was blessed with a lot more size than my sons are. So I'm bigger than all 3 of my boys in height and weight. And
Yeah.
I had a decent playing career back when I used to try to play a little bit of football and compete. But the one thing that really started making me aware of persistence, right, and perseverance is watching my kids compete in football. So a classic example is Joshua. So my youngest son, he plays at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. 5'8", 149 pounds. And he'd been told from the time that he was 5 years old, you're not big enough. You're going to get hurt. We're going to keep you aside. And ever since he was 5 years old, he's won at every level that he's ever played at, right? I remember when he won the flag football championship here in Texas. And football's a cult here, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many times where I see him getting physically beat up, right? And I saw kids were faster than him. And it's so amazing because he had such a passion that he just continued to grind. And I'll brag on him a little bit. He's a 2-time all-conference player in collegiate football. He's a 2-time All-American in track. And he still has some eligibility left, all you big-time scouts out there. But watching him, the grit, his refuse to lose, his refusal to give up. And it's so amazing because every year he has to prove himself, because you get some coach that's like, yeah, man, you got good ball skills, but you're just too little.
Yeah.
And every year he comes out, and that has been such an inspiration to me, because I'm thinking, man, this dude is out here at a collegiate level, playing against these 300 pounders, and he's trying to tackle these 270-pound tight ends. Yeah. And he never complains, right? Because he feels like this is something that I have to do. Yeah. I want it so bad that I'm not going to let anything stop me from achieving my goals. So when I think about, persistence, perseverance, when I think about grit, then I look at, this cat, and he's an example for me. And I'm like, how can I come in here and say that, the business world is kicking my butt and I just want to quit? I want to fold up shop, understanding that I have 500 employees dependent on me.
Yeah.
I've got debtors. I got debt. I've got bills that need to be paid. I have people that have bills that need to be paid. So, I love it when you get to a point where quitting isn't an option, right? Just covering up your head and hiding in the corner, it's just not an option. We just, people, they need to keep moving forward. But I guess the question I would ask you as a counselor is, what's some of the advice that you give somebody that may come to you that's on the brink of quitting, that's on the brink of shutting it down, right? How would you approach that in your profession?
So I work as a coach, and there's a slight difference between coach and counselor. So I work with the person, I work with who they are. So we're sticking with Josh. It wouldn't be, here's how anybody can get ahead and persevere at this position. Here's how you, with your speed, with your hand skills, with your, ability to track the ball. Like, I would start with the individual. So if I was talking with somebody about, well, they're trying to figure out a way to keep moving. Well, let's figure out what your thing is. Your thing may be your ability to just duration. You may be the tortoise instead of the hare. So pace that out. You may be the hare. You may be, well, how quick you are to get to stuff. So let's get you, ahead of the spot. I start with the individual skill set and let them see who they are and use that to map how to keep moving. But if you're talking about the mindset of how to keep putting one foot in front of the other, like I said, I would start with, why? Why are you doing this? Because that's got to be the carrot in front of you. Because it's not the goal why we stop going. It's usually I forget why I even got this job. Right. I forget why I got into this relationship. I forget why I moved to this city. I forget why I even bought this car. Like I forget the why I was doing something. And or if the why isn't strong enough, then it doesn't hold up. It's not durable. So how do I put one foot in front of the other? Just always remembering why I got into this. Yeah. You know, what is that thing that I'm chasing? What is that thing that's putting, the battery in my back what is it that I'm trying to accomplish? And keeping that top of mind. And because that needs to be the loudest voice. Yeah. It can't be you're too small, you're too slow, you're too this, you're too that. Then I let those become the top of mind narratives. And then it's easy for me to lose steam, lose motivation, and lose drive. Yeah. But if my narrative is I can, I will, I must, I'll accomplish, I'll do, move narrative, get out the way. Like, right. Like when I keep that at top of mind, that all that other stuff is just chatter. Yeah. All that is the sound of the gravel under my feet as I continue to keep running. All and right. So if I keep my why in front of me, that's how I think a great perspective and a tool to keep going.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to throw a curveball at you, man, and I know that's not always easy to do. So I'm working on a book right now. Yeah, called "Utilizing the Imposter Syndrome as Fuel." Yeah, right, and that's something that I've struggled from, throughout my life, as wondering, could I do it, right? And I do a good job of hiding it, right? Most people that know me say, "Hey, he's a pretty confident guy." But they don't realize that in the back of my mind, sometimes I'm like, wow, that's a tall mountain to climb. Yeah. What people usually see is I'm in process, right? I'm making progress, as we talked about in episode 1, right? If you're not progressing, you're dying. What are your thoughts on fake it till you make it, right? And let me put a little context around it. Okay. There's been times, and there's some of my clients that I talk to, and so often my advice is just keep going. Yeah. And people are telling me, but I don't feel like it. I don't have the energy. I don't have the strength. I don't have the financial backing. I don't have the credit. I just, and I'm just like, just get up in the morning and go to work and just keep doing what you're supposed to be. Now, don't go start slacking. Yeah. But what I found is sometimes you have to create confidence until the real confidence arrives. Okay. So, I don't want to talk too much over it, but I've actually utilized, and it doesn't work for everybody, that fake it till you make it. What are your thoughts on that, right? Sometimes we like manufacturing grit, or can grit be manufactured?
The belief that I can, like if you may not have the evidence to support the abilities you believe you have, but it doesn't mean that you don't have them. Like you may believe I'm the fastest person in this group right here. I've never seen them run. They've never seen me run. We've never ran alongside each other, but I'm just going to believe that I am. And when I get out here, I'm going to give it my all. And you may end up being that individual. Like you can build some confidence up. I think the fake it till you make it philosophy, I think it whatever gets your feet moving. So I look at it like if someone told you had to walk from San Francisco to Brooklyn, like there's not a timetable how long it takes you, but that's the only way you can get there is on foot. At some point you realize I'm gonna cross the desert, I'm gonna go through the snow, I'm gonna go through all this stuff, and you can talk yourself, you'll be standing in San Francisco giving yourself 1,000,001 reasons why you can't do it. Okay, or you can just start walking and cross that desert when you come to it. Yeah. And see if you can't figure out a way to get across the desert when you get there. See if you can't figure out a way to get over the mountains when you get there. See if you can't figure out a way to get through the cold heat when you get there. And so you may sit there and say, okay, you're telling yourself in San Francisco all the ways you can't do it. The other perspective is, I guess, the fake it till you make it. You keep telling yourself you can. You may get all the way to Arizona before you really have problems. So what's the difference? Am I having a conversation with myself in San Francisco, or am I having a conversation with myself in Phoenix? So even if you haven't made it to Brooklyn yet, but you were a whole lot further than where you started just by starting.
Yeah.
So
So
you may
every
need to,
step you take, I'm sorry to cut you off. Every step you take, you're that much closer to the goal.
yeah, you may not be there yet, but you're closer than you were. So if you keep telling yourself you can't, that's a conversation you have standing in place. When you tell yourself, I'm just going to do what I can with what I know, with what I've got in the moment, and just put one foot in front of the other, and then see where you are.
Yeah.
Because even sometimes the things we think we can't do is mental. Like anybody who's ever ran, your brain checks out before your body does. Very rarely has an end. Like you'll see those marathon runners who their body is seizing up, and they're very few people ever reach that level of fatigue in their life.
I agree 100%.
You know what I'm saying? That's when you can't run anymore.
Yeah.
Most people, your brain has told you, I've been running too long, I have to stop. Your lungs aren't collapsing. Your body's not seizing. You're telling yourself you have to stop.
Yeah.
So
I've read so many times, and I hope somebody out there is listening. I've read so many times that I read a book by James Lawrence, The Iron Cowboy. And in his book, he says, at the point that your brain starts to tell your body, I'm tired and I need to stop, I need a rest, you're only at about 50% utilization.
Yeah.
You got a whole lot more in the tank if you just keep going. Yeah. So I agree with that. So let me ask you this though, and you may have touched on it a little bit from like the internal motivation.
Yeah.
And I've got somewhere I want to go after this, but let's talk about the power of positive persuasion.
Okay.
Right? Because, as I hear you talking about telling yourself to keep going, take one step, right? Yeah. How important is it to also have people around you that are being supportive, and that are kind of also giving you those positive affirmations that, you can do it. So let me hear your thoughts on that. And I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go next.
So I think that's individually based. So I think depending upon your level of commitment to it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. Like I think of, God bless the dead, the great Kobe Bryant. When he retired, they had that commercial where he was on the court and all the fans of all the opposing teams were booing him.
Yeah.
And he was like singing along like an opera, because those boos and those naysayers are what drove him and gave him extra motivation. Oh, you say I can't? Oh, you think I can't do it? Right. And that fueled them. So some people, the naysayers are actually, their competitive spirit actually fuels it. For others, this is about self-awareness. Which one are you? For other people, it chips away at our drive and our motivation.
Yeah.
So some people don't need to be affirmed. Others do. It's about knowing which one you are. And if you're somebody who, let's just say you don't need to be affirmed, but naysayers affect you, then getting yourself in a circle of people who are either at least neutral or positive. If you're somebody who gets the conflict drives you and makes you try harder.
Yeah.
Okay, then putting yourself in those spaces, those are the people who are a little more braggadocious, because they're almost poking the bear to get you to say something just so I can use that one sentence to get 10 more reps, to do 2 more miles, to stay 3 more hours. Like, so when it comes to which one, the naysayers, positive affirmation, your environment, you got to start with knowing yourself and which one you need to be, what environment you need to be in.
Yeah. I like that. My favorite book of all is The 48 Laws of Power.
Okay.
By Robert Greene. And I don't know if you read it, but for anybody who hasn't, I strongly suggest it. Now, it can be dangerous, but if not utilized
that book
properly. But yeah, the 48 Laws of Power is amazing. But one of the laws states, avoid the unhappy and the unlucky.
Okay.
Moods and attitudes are as infectious as disease. And what I have found is that that's very true. I don't need a cheerleading team. Yeah. That's never been my motivation. Nobody has ever challenged me more than I've challenged myself. But I am the type of person that if I'm around somebody that's full of negative energy, if I'm around somebody that, I used to have a teacher that said, for every problem, there's a solution. Well, I know people that for every solution, they have a problem.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you do this? Well, that's not going to work. Well, why don't you try that? No, I don't want to try. That's not going to work. And what I have really found, especially over the last 15 years, when I start meeting people with that negative energy, when I find people that every time I see their name come on my caller ID, the first thing that crosses my mind is, I wonder what's wrong now.
Yeah.
Or if I answer the phone, how much is this going to cost me? Because they're having a problem. They're getting evicted. They need a loan. Their car broke down. Their girlfriend left them. And I get people that's like, by the time I hang up the phone, I am just exhausted. And what it's actually done is I start getting a text message like, hey, man, why you not answering my call?
No.
Hey, I haven't seen you. Where you at? Holler at your boy. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get back to you. But, that's a big one for me. It's for me being persistent, I just can't have, especially my inner circle, I don't want to be around negative people. And I probably shouldn't give advice, but I would tell people, if you got somebody if it makes you shake their head, I don't care who it is, family, friends, relationships, if every time you hear them, it's just negative, 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 I just think that's a drain, right? And it could be a drain on something else that you're trying to do. And if you love them, it's even harder because you care, right? And they know you love them, so they know it works. You're going to feel sorry for them, and they may get their way. But, you kind of hit on it, just having that negative party around you, right? That, sometimes, what do you think? You think it's necessary to cut that cancer or what?
So it's knowing how much affected do you get. I am a firm believer in boundaries. So that's where we have a conversation. So it's, are you telling me about these problems because you are looking for a solution? Or is it because you need somebody to vent to? Is it you're just speaking out loud? You're just thinking out loud? What are we doing here?
Right.
And so I said, because the way that I am, if you're bringing this to me, the way I'm wired is to look for a solution. You telling me a problem, me looking for a solution, uses my mental and emotional bandwidth in this conversation. So if you just need somebody to vent to, I'm not the person to vent to.
Okay.
So if you're bringing this to me because you'd like my help, then after we have this conversation, what you do with the information will dictate if we talk about this again. So if you come to me you want help with a solution or something, and here are some plausible solutions for you, and you don't do any of them, okay, then you weren't looking for a solution, or you were, and I'm not the person to help you. Yeah. So in any event, this is a conversation you need to take to somebody else. But I having those clear understandings of this, and if they don't receive it, this is why I'm going to be harder to get on the phone.
Yeah.
So just so we're clear, because I'm a believer, I try to the best of my ability to have transparent relationships. And so this is why I'm harder to reach, because when you call, I'm not saying your problems aren't valid or your problems aren't important or whatever, but the dynamic in which we discuss them is become problematic for me.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean I don't care, but what are we doing? I have friends that just want to vent, and I don't internalize the venting.
Yeah.
Because I know I just need to get this off my chest. I'll go right ahead. You just need a familiar face to talk your problems to. I don't have to do anything with them. So just go on, let it out. And I don't internalize it. It doesn't affect my drive, motivation, nothing. But these are when you have to figure out which one you are and how you do with this stuff. That's why I bring everything back to self-awareness.
I can remember in my early days of, kind of training and wanting to be an athlete, right? And I do remember a point where I wanted to quit. Okay. Right. I was like, I don't like this. It's not fun. I got people out here hitting on me. I was a bit of a mama's boy at, 8 or 9, and had been a little sheltered. And I'm out there in the hood with some studs that have been playing, since they were 5. And I was like, I don't want to do this. So I can kind of remember going to coach saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I quit. Yeah. And so if you want to quit, that's fine. But you need to understand that the more you quit, the easier it becomes to quit the next time. Yeah. So, and I bring that up for, our conversation today is about persistence, right? Perseverance, having some grit. Let's talk a little bit about the flip side of it, right? Not having any perseverance, not having any grit. I think I got a buddy, Tony Jones, from Ohio, Toledo, and I heard him call somebody a dandelion one time. A dandelion, and then they just fall apart, right? Let's talk a little bit about, the people that don't have perseverance. Like, what are some of the characteristics, right? And I have a million in my head right now that I could just start running off, because I know people that quit, and I can see their lifestyles today. I can see it, but I'd like to hear it, from the perspective of on a personal side. What are some results of quitting?
So it depends on. So everything to me is multi-layered, multifaceted when you're talking about human beings.
Right.
So it's why you're quitting. So like they talk about younger people now with jobs. Younger people will quit a job after 3 weeks if it doesn't serve them. So, and then continue to quit up. You left a job for $15 an hour to quit to get a job for 16, left a 16 to get a 17, left a 17 to get an 18. You did a whole lot of quitting.
But that's different though.
But that's what I'm saying is, why are you quitting?
Right.
So you can make the fact is, if you quit a job 4 times in 6 months, regardless of why you did it, on paper, you quit 4 times. So the important part is why are you doing it? What is the reason you're quitting? Now, if you're quitting because as soon as I met a little resistance, as soon as the rubber met the road, I checked out. Okay, if that's why you keep quitting, because every time you get a little pushback, you run from it, then you're going to have, what does that look like? What does your life look like if every time that happens? Every time the relationship doesn't go your way, or the first time you get an argument or hear something you don't like, I'm out. The first time, you're enrolled in class and the teacher says something you don't like, you drop the class. As soon as your boss says something you don't like, you quit. You'll start to see that pattern of behavior if that's the reason why you're quitting. If you're sitting there saying that I'm not willing to go through the fire for what I want, that will be consistent.
Yeah.
Or you don't have a good gauge of what you want. Like, we put a lot of things in front of, like, we'll use words like procrastination. We'll use words like lack of perseverance, lack of drive. All that is directly correlated to your value system.
Wow.
So people don't procrastinate because they have an issue with time management. You don't do something, you delay doing something you don't want to do because you do not value it. That's the reason why you delay it. That's the reason why you can walk away from it. It's a value system. It's not a time management issue. So for people who keep doing these things, your values and your behaviors may not be in alignment. So that's why you keep having this behavior. You with folks you don't really want to be with. You at jobs you don't really want to work. The goal you said you were going for is not really something that's important to you. You're getting a college degree because everybody told you to go to college, not because you want to go to college. That's why you can skip class.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, your values aren't in alignment.
Yeah. One thing I find is, as I, flirt around and float around in middle-aged, right? I meet so many people, my age group, friends I've known for years, and I hear them talk about, man, I really feel like, I'm in my 50s and I haven't done enough.
Okay.
Right. These are the conversations we're starting to have now. Like, have I accomplished what I needed to accomplish? Right. Because as we start looking down the road and, we got what they say, we got more days in the rear view than you have in the windshield. The front, we got more days behind us than ahead of us. The one thing that I can tell you, and I rarely say this to people because I keep my opinion to myself a lot, but the people that are really dissatisfied with their lives today, again, I'm in mid 50s, right? These are the people that I can remember, like you just said, they dropped out of college because they just didn't feel like it, right? And then they had a good job. And I meet so many people now that say, man, I used to have a good job working for the city. I used to have a good job working for the steel company, right? Man, I used to be a great car salesman. And I'm thinking, you used to do a lot. What happened? My boss didn't like me. My coach didn't like me. My girl, couldn't, wasn't on my team. And I feel like this road is so littered with people that lack grit. Now, why do I bring that up? Right? Because we want to talk about positive motivation. What I want to do is be encouraging to people to say, man, we can't keep quitting, because when you get to the end of the road and you got no certificates and you got no plaques and you got no trophies, you can't say I'm having a 20-year anniversary. I've been on my job for so long and I'm getting that proverbial gold watch. We have to finish something, right? We have to, find the motivation. You have to persevere. You have to be persistent. You have to fight through the tough times, right? In order to become a soldier in the Army, you have to get through boot camp. They say boot camp is pretty tough. Never been to boot camp, but my middle son is a veteran, and he's explained to me the challenge that he went through of going through boot camp, right? And so I guess the words of encouragement that I would offer is, just because it's hard doesn't mean you should quit. And what I can strongly suggest or warn you is that you will regret it. And I'm not talking about leaving a bad relationship. And again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not prescribing anything. But I do think it's important for that one person out there that's thinking about quitting because it's gotten too hard. Why don't you study a little bit harder? The weight loss journey is just why don't you watch your diet a little bit closer, right? Why don't you increase your workouts by 5 minutes? There's things that you can do to get you over these rough patches, to start to see the progress. So that's kind of my message, right? So I'm gonna leave it with you.
So the only thing that I wouldn't say push back. The only thing that sticks out to me about that is that, to me, I would say is completely true if you can't accept the outcome. So if you're not willing to give 100%, if you're not willing to keep trying, if you're not willing to stay in the class, if you're not willing to stay at the job, if you're not willing to fight for your marriage, if you're not willing to be involved with your kids, then be able to accept the outcome of doing those things.
Yeah.
Because that's the part where, look, you may never want to make a lot of money. You may have no desire to have a family. You may not care about a new car or accolades. That may not be important to you. So you can accept having a life of leisure. Or if you just got by, you slept on people's couches. In your life, you may have lived the way you wanted to live, and you can accept everything that did or did not come with it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't, and you start feeling like you got shortchanged in this life, and you start feeling like you got a raw deal, and you feel like the boss was messing with you, and that the teacher didn't like you, and that the coach was playing favorites, you're not accepting the life that you have. Okay, then understand there's some things that you're going to need to do to make these changes. So whichever way that you want to end out, it's, I said, knowing who you are, knowing what you want, knowing what you can accept, because you can't get closure with your decisions and closure with your outcome without the acceptance. So that's how you have people who are 52 talking about that high school coach that didn't give them that break, and then they would have went to play in college, then they would have went to the pro, then they never accepted 1982.
Right.
Like, just so you you got to be able to accept and live with the life that you have, and that's going to be based upon the culmination of the decisions that you make. Yeah. So how do you stay motivated? How do you stay driven? How do you not find yourself regretful in the end? And real quick, because I know we're closing out. I remember right out of high school, I used to work as a server in a senior living center. So I was a waiter and a busser. And it was a place where senior citizens, they lived there and they ate there, and they had like nursing staff, all that stuff in the same facility. And we used to serve 2 meals. And it was probably about 90% women, 10% men, because most of these women outlived their husbands. And so for the 10% of men that was there, every now and then I'd have a conversation. I was like 19, 20 at the time when I worked there. And for all the guys I talked to, it did not matter their ethnicity. It didn't matter what their previous profession was. It didn't matter anything. They all started off the same sentence, the same way when we had a real conversation about life. And the first 2 words all of them said was, I wish. I wish I'd have spent more time with my family. I wish I'd have developed more friends. And that place was expensive to live with. So they had all made money.
Yeah.
but they were all like, these were people in their 80s, some of them 90s, who hadn't seen their grown children and grandchildren in forever. Once they ended up there, nobody came around because they hadn't established things. They hadn't done stuff. They were all sitting and saying, I wish I'd have done this. I wish I'd have done that. If you can get to the end and accept, I did what I wanted to do and I was okay with how this played out, then you're all right. But if you're going to be at the end saying, I wish I'd have stayed in class, I wish I'd have stayed at that job, I wish I'd have fought harder for that relationship, that's what lets you know, okay, this is why I need to put one foot in front of the other.
That's great.
Because this is something that I do not want to get further down the road telling myself, I wish I'd have fought a little bit harder.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. As I heard you walk through that, I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Covey, and he has the 7 habits of highly effective people. Yeah. And, one of the big habits that he promotes is begin with the end in mind. Yeah. Right? Begin with the end in mind. So, and what I mean by that is exactly what you were saying. Nobody lays on their deathbed and says, I wish I'd have spent a little more time at work. Yeah. Right? They're saying, I wish I'd have spent a little more time with my kids. I wish I'd have established a better relationship with my significant others. I wish I had went and got some sand between my toes, right? And enjoyed some beach time. And, I've often thought about it myself. As you know, I'm a recovering workaholic, and I'm trying to shift my life into doing more of the things that I enjoy, like what we're doing right now. But, I think part of it is make sure that the things that we take on are things that we actually want. Yeah. Because it's a less chance if you quitting it if it's something that you really have a passion for. Yeah. But begin with the end in mind so that we're not on our deathbeds saying, I wish I had spent more time with my kids, right? And hey, I'm 54, and I can tell you my 30s, I spent very little time with my kids. Right. And that ended up being a time where my 2 oldest sons were probably needed me the most. So I certainly wish I spent less time, and I was working, I was at my desk. I brought the paycheck home. I was responsible, but I wish I'd have been in more practices. Right. So I think we certainly want to begin with the end in mind. And then, so what I mean by that is when it's all over, what are people going to say? Hey, man, that guy accomplished what he wanted. On your deathbed, you can look back and says, hey, I got to own a company. I got to run a business. I got to help a lot of families. I got to go to school. I got to do some things. That's what you want to position yourself. So if you're always beginning with the end in mind, everything that you do is going to be leading up to that goal, right? This is a person that I want to be with. So even doing a rough patch, I'm going to make sure that I show up every day and be respectful and let her know that I don't like you very much right now, but I love you, right? I'm going to be in the game. So, man, I think this is great. Hopefully it's somebody is receiving some motivation and some positivity. One thing I always like to say when we wrap up is you provide a great service with your disc profiles. Not only am I a brother, but I'm a customer. You provide the disc profiles for my company, TMC Workforce Solutions. And, those assessments bring a lot of value. Why don't you tell everybody about the service that you provide before we wrap up?
Yeah. So anybody who's unfamiliar with what a disc profile is, it's basically a test that shows how an individual deals with problems, decision-making, interacts with people, the pace we like to work at, how we follow rules and protocol. This particular assessment comes with a breakdown of who we are naturally, like just when we roll out of bed and how we operate versus our adaptive, like who we become under stress, under pressure. It shows potential blind spots in behavior, ideal communication style. It comes with a very thorough, 20-plus page report of an individual. And it said it's self-awareness without judgment. So it's not through the lens of this is good, bad, right, or wrong. It's how am I? How do I interface with life? How do I interact in the world? And then using that information to help maneuver where it is we want to be, whether it be in business and family, just in life in general.
So people that want to get a disc profile done, and I know you, I don't know if you're doing any couple specials as we come up on Valentine's Day, But for people that want to get a disc profile, how do they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to mykeystome.com, mykeystome, mykeystome.com. It'll give you more information on the assessment. You can set up a consultation to give you more information, answer any of your questions, and to get you started. And yes, I actually do couples stuff with the assessment. I've done those too.
Right? Yeah. So that's good stuff. And and me, I'm James Morris. I'm the president and CEO of TMC Workforce Solutions. The president and CEO of TMC Supply Chain Solutions. So if any of you all are in Texas, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio, looking for jobs, if you go to tmcworkforce.com, we're always hiring. We're always looking for good people. We've got distribution fulfillment facility in Indiana, Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we got that going on. I've got a great team that runs those companies. So they're very pleased that I'm not so involved in that stuff every day. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing more of this stuff. We're trying to help people. We're putting on a great business empowerment event on April 27th in Houston. Expect to have some great speakers. We've got some awesome sponsors that have already come on board. So super excited about that. It's called Winning 23. Just go to the www.morrismotivation.com and you can learn more about the coaching that we're doing. And we're having fun. We're here to help people. Like I said, we're not doctors. We're not lawyers. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're trying to offer some positivity. We're sharing the things that we're going through with you in hopes that we can help somebody, right? We can help somebody. So, and that's all I have for this week. I'm just want to encourage everybody to be good to each other, be positive. And hey, bro, I guess we'll see you same bat time, same bat station next week.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. You have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too.
All right.